All right, welcome back to Exponential Awareness. So, we have a post here that reads: The Russian and Chinese militaries on Tuesday launched massive naval and air drills across both hemispheres, which will run until September 16th. The Ocean 24 exercise spans the Pacific and Arctic Oceans, the Mediterranean, Caspian, and Baltic seas, and involves over 400 warships, submarines, support vessels, more than 120 planes and helicopters, and over 90,000 troops. The Russian Defense Ministry said. Russian President Putin said in comments to military officials that the war games are the largest of their kind in 3 decades, and that China's warships and planes were taking part. China confirmed, saying the two countries' navies would cruise together in the Pacific, but gave no further details. A total of 15 countries have been invited to observe the drills, Putin said, without naming them. So, in the light of the last video I mentioned about mission creep and scope creep of the US military's involvement with the war between Russia and Ukraine, we now see Russia and China partnering up for a massive military drill in the Pacific, in which 15 other countries were invited to observe. So in that last video, I read a portion of a comment that said the US doesn't believe they have enough munitions to sustain their own stockpiles if they allow Ukraine to deplete them, and that new technologies were just being fielded, and that there's not enough of those to aid in the war with Ukraine. So if all that is true, then how could the US manage a war with these two massive countries and militaries, and supposedly other countries who might be a part of it? How could the US sustain a war with them? Unless the US is bluffing and pretending to be weaker than they really are. And perhaps unless Russia and China are bluffing and pretending to be stronger than they really are. The problem that happens when one person bluffs or one country bluffs, that's fine. That's relatively stable. When everybody's bluffing and you don't know who's telling the truth, then that becomes very unstable. That is when very significant events transpire, because no one is sure of anyone else's capabilities and who's telling the truth. And so some countries act overconfident, and some countries respond out of lack of confidence to be able to sustain a fight in the future if they don't act today, because of the bluffs of their opponents. Things become exponentially destabilized, right? And so you had Russian President Vladimir Putin travel to several countries in the past month or so, which seems like he was forming partnerships of sorts, not only for military support, but also for material support. Likewise, we have seen Xi Jinping go to several countries on the Belt and Road Initiative and other initiatives, forming partnerships for potentially military partnerships and material partnerships, economic partnerships, if you will. In the light of that, zooming out again in looking at the world as if it's a set of pieces and partnerships moving around, you see something I've gone over before. If you draw a line down here around Belarus, through Ukraine, through Turkey, who is very much opposed against many of EU and NATO's stances, and against Israel, a strategic partner of the US, you draw a line right there. It's almost like you have a war front developing. You have this whole area destabilizing and potentially getting ready for conflict with each other. You have much of this area that's in conflict with each other right now. Over here in the west, or over here in the east, the west of the US, the east of the Asian continent, you have partnerships here, 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 here. And here, creating what's called the first island chain. But you also have Vietnam, Laos, Thailand, pivoting towards China relations, things thawing between those two. And they've historically, for the last few decades, been more aligned to Western values, Western sets of beliefs and conduct. You have Russia traveling to Mongolia, partnering with North Korea, with China, with Iran. You have Wagner forces in here conducting activities, right? You see partnerships aligning along this front against this front, and you see this front forming, and you see partnerships forming against the front that is forming. This area is also becoming very destabilized and splitting between sides. So you have fractures and battle lines being drawn down here, potentially even down through here, around the west and east of the Black Sea. Another data point, you have the US saying, essentially, it's not ready or equipped for another war. Is that a bluff? Is that pretending to be weaker than they really are to throw off potential opponents and give them overconfidence in their abilities, overextension in their abilities, and thus putting themselves at risk for a significant attack? Only time will tell. Until then, that's all I have. Or until next time, that's all I have. Stay exponentially aware.